Welcome, guys. Welcome. We're going to go live with the undercover virologist who just showed up. And we're going to do some talking today about probably terrain theory, I'm guessing, the topic. Welcome, guys. Welcome. What's up, man?
What's up, dude? Can you hear me well?
Yep. Let me just turn my volume up real quick here. Can you hear me? Hear me okay?
Yep.
Right on, man. Am I cut off? All right. So what's up? Is it Jake or Jacob?
You can do whatever you want, man. I go by Jake, Jacob, Jakey, whatever.
Jakey. All right, I'll call you Jakey. No, I'm just kidding. What's going on, man? What are you up to today? Where are you at? You in California?
No, upstate New York.
Oh, New York. All right, cool.
Yeah. I'm just chilling
like
with the fam at their house. It's a beautiful day, so why not?
Cool. Yeah, right on, man. Yeah, we're a little rainy over here in Nebraska, but it's cool. It's a nice chill Sunday.
Nice. Always a good vibe.
Yeah. So yeah, this is our first time meeting for everybody that's watching, and so and I found you through Josh Button.
Yeah.
He made a clip of you talking about parasites, and I thought that was really, really well said, and it sounds like you get it, man. So I figured getting you on would be fun, and I didn't prepare for this at all. I have no notes, nothing. I just figured we would just wing it because we probably have a lot to talk about with.
Of course. I prefer winging it anyway.
Yeah. And terrain theory is just such a rabbit hole, man, that goes so many different directions. I don't think we're going to run out of ththings to talk about.
Absolutely not. There's so many people to talk about, so just rattle on.
For sure. So yeah, why don't you just give me a rundown of what your channel name means, Undercover Virologist, and like how you found yourself to be on Instagram talking about this stuff.
Absolutely, dude. So it kind of all started in 2019, 2020, as with everybody. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and what I was seeing just didn't match up with what I was being told exactly what was happening on the news. So that got me into Tom Cowan's work, Dr. Tom Cowan, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, Amanda Vollmer, Stefan Lunka. And then we just kind of connected through Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Then we became like a kind of a Telegram chat together. And from then, we just started shooting it, just talking about certain topics and researching things together. We eventually developed the end of COVID, which I'm sure you know and many people do. It was an online school specifically about terrain.
Mm-hmm.
We had like 150,000 people take it, so it was amazing. It did so well.
Wow.
And my specialty specifically was infectious diseases, studying those and understanding how the body works through the disease process. And I don't come from a medical background. It really kind of just came out of nowhere. I always had an affinity for geography, history, health. But learning from these people, the people I just mentioned, Mike Stone, Sam and Mark Bailey, all these people. And from then on, I just started applying it with my life and figured, okay, I kind of get this. So let me just teach people how to apply these terrain principles in their life. Mm-hmm. And I figured since my specialty was infectious diseases and virology, I would be an undercover virologist, kind of exposing it from a virology standpoint. So that's where the name came from.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't expect to have a following. I didn't expect to be this big, but I love it. And I'm currently studying to be a naturopathic practitioner, and I'm in school with the holographic blood for the Bigelsons. So my goal is to make my own practice so I can help people in a very terrain aspect, and that's the goal. So that's what I'm working towards right now.
Amazing, dude. I'm so happy to hear that, man. And a little bit jealous, but that's awesome, dude. Because it's like, how old are you right now?
26.
Oh, dude, yeah. you're at the perfect age to do something like that, dude. And oh my God, I wish I was 26 when I found all this shit out, dude. Because I'm 42 right now.
Dude,
I'm like, I got a wife and a baby, and it's like, dude, I'm just gotta work for my kids right now. But God,
that's a job
awesome,
too, dude. Yeah.
Going to school to do that, like, oh man, that's you're gonna help a lot of people, and open up some doors, I think, for new ways of thinking about all this stuff.
That's the goal for sure.
Oh, sweet. So just to kind of cap that, as Dr. Tom Cowan always loves to do. So you basically around 2019, I'm guessing during the whole pandemic thing, you started waking up and realizing that things weren't adding up. Probably sensed something was a little bit fishy. Maybe some lies were getting fed around, and so you decided to. You linked up with. Did you link up with Tom Cowan directly?
So you can hear me, okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Not directly. It was more so through a group chat. So we have a group chat that's specifically for terrain practitioners and teachers, and he was in that chat. So I've had conversations with him. I've done projects with him. But primarily, I've linked up with Alex Zek, and through Alex Zek, I've gotten the connections, and we've done work together. And currently, we're working on the Jamie Andrews virology control project. I'm not sure if you're aware of what's happening with that.
I'm not.
But it's essentially, what Stefan Lanka did in 2021? He was basically doing control experiments to show virology was crap. And Jamie Andrews out of France, he's doing the same thing, but going a little deeper. And so we're advising him on this project. And right now, I mean, Cowans are involved, and we're all kind of advising, but what the project is showing is conclusively that virology is just complete pseudoscientific garbage. So through these kind of projects and collaboration, I've built relationships with the Cowans and everybody. And, I just love it. I just having this whole network of people that help have a like-minded view. That's what we need to kind of just overthrow the allopathic system and kind of make our own medical foundation.
Yeah, that's the idea, man. Just create an alternative. You can sit here and complain all we want about what they're talking about, or just create a whole alternative way to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, all right. So I personally started waking up to the virus stuff about 6 years ago when I started eating raw meat, and I discovered Augenis von der Planitz' work, and he was the first guy that I ever discovered that was like questioning viral diseases and things like that. And so the initial thing that I was taught through his research, or his opinions, or whatever you want to call it, is that he calls them soaps. He calls them, whatever, things that clean out your body. And that to me makes sense. It makes sense that, and I'm going to ask you in a second what you think they are, if they're even there. But it makes sense to me that if there is such thing as a virus, that it's created by your body and it's there to detoxify toxicity inside your cells and cleanse you out, and it's employed in situations to where potentially bacteria and parasites are not able to do that. So it's like a more heavy-duty detox. So I've heard that theory, and a lot of the raw primal people believe that. They believe they're just basically cleansing agents produced by the body. They're not transmitted physically at all. I've heard, the bioresonance theory through Tom Cowan, where we resonate with each other, and I love that theory, man. That because there's obviously something going on. People are getting sick. That's not a conspiracy theory. Like, obviously everybody gets sick. I get sick. I just had a flu this summer. And now that I have a family, it's super obvious to me that it gets passed around somehow. It's super obvious. So that could be through bioresonance. It could be through, frequencies and things like that. And I think people have a hard time wrapping their heads around that because it's an invisible force. But you can explain it through like radio waves and things like that. You get a radio signal sent to your radio and it plays music. Why wouldn't there be other frequencies out there that could trigger detoxifications as like a herd defense mechanism? I love those ideas. And then as of recently, I believe Cowan started talking about how they're just potentially just artifacts of the actual microscope. So like what these people are claiming are viruses are actually just like artifacts created by the experiment. I've heard that theory too. So that now you're getting into basically viruses are like total bullshit zone. And so I'm not 100% sure what to believe. At this point, I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do know, and I do believe that if you believe in like a creator or a force that created this entire realm, and it doesn't make sense that they would create these tiny little space invaders to
No.
fly around and kill everybody.
Exactly.
So that if you break it all down to that fundamental idea, and you can call it whatever you want. Some people call it believing in God or whatever, and this doesn't have to be like a religious thing at all. But it's, to me, it's a logical belief that everything obviously works so beautifully and symbiotically together. Then why would there be these tiny little bugs around that we have to be scared of? And then also there's the fear element. I've learned as of the last 6 years that if it's out there and it's meant to scare you or make you, fearful or doubtful, then it's most likely bullshit. It's created by the lower frequencies, the lower realms, and it's there to control you and manipulate you. So I adopt those ideas, and so that's how I sort of navigate now the bullshit versus the truth, But to kind of wrap it up here, what do you think a virus is? We'll just go from there. What do you think a virus is?
Of course. So I'll try to touch on everything you said. So the theory about viruses being solvents and soaps that dissolve certain things and come from your body, I heard that starting in like 2021. I forget who exactly was starting to talk about that. But initially I was like, okay, that kind of seems logical in a weird way. But then looking into the history of virology, you then start to see, okay, so viruses are just crap, just BS from the start. So it's important to understand the definition of words with virology. So virus in Latin terms, in its oldest terms, meant poison. So right then and there, we need to understand that a poison in the medical system was once a virus. In the 1800s, they started to think that poisons were causing people to get sick. And that's why they started to use the word virus. It did not mean a submicroscopic pathogenic particle. It meant a literal cellular toxin.
Mm-hmm.
It then began to kind of morph itself into a particle because many of these substances they were labeling as viruses weren't pathogenic. And many of the times, they control experiments with like undiseased tissue and diseased tissue. And when the tissue would rot, it would create the same exact waste product. So from then on, they were like, okay, it has to be something else because germs weren't causing people to get sick. Louis Pasteur failed, Robert Koch failed, so they needed something else. So it initially started with tobacco mosaic virus. So they thought that there was a virus attacking these plants. When in actuality, when the plants were overgrown or in soil that wasn't very nutrient dense, they were getting too much water, not enough sunlight, they would die. And when the plants would die, the leaves would get these little like tobacco mosaics on the leaf, and they'll say, oh, it must be a virus. What's funny is that people today, they'll say, that was the first virus ever found. But it's important to understand, in the 1800s, it wasn't a virus particle. It was a poison.
Mm-hmm.
It was a toxin. They changed it. They changed the definition to become more physical. And then how that changed was in the 1950s, a guy named John Enders came along, and he was like, yo, I'm going to just poison all these cells with like 25 different ingredients, and then the cells break down. I'll take pictures of the breakdown, and then that's the virus right there.
Mm-hmm.
But he never did any control experiments. So you're never actually showing that these particles are causing illness. All you're doing is taking a picture and then making a bunch of claims.
Right.
So the idea that a virus, which by definition today is a submicroscopic pathogenic replication competent particle that causes disease, it can't be a solvent because that would then change the definition of what a virus is. Mm-hmm. Can there be solvents that our body creates? Sure. Can there be cellular mechanism in the body that the body creates to try a detox? Yeah, for sure. But it can't be a virus because a virus is something that will make you sick. Mm-hmm. So it's important to not do what virologists did and change the definitions of words. And another thing is with Cowan's theory, it's not really a theory, it's been proven. These cellular particles that come out of the cell culture, when they do cell culture process, electron microscopy, they have been proven to be apoptotic bodies, exosomes, microvesicular bodies, cellular debris. Depending on what scientist you ask, they'll say there's something different. Oh, that's an exosome. Oh, that's a virus. Oh, that's a clathrin-coated vesicle. No one actually knows what they are because they don't do anything. So they're just just kind of dead. They're literally not doing anything.
Uh-huh.
So to make a claim about something that you can't really experiment with, that's a big issue in science, because in virology, they don't actually have a virus at the beginning. They'll create the issue in the cell and then make a claim after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So viruses being, like you said, artifacts is very likely what they actually are. They're just taking pictures of cellular debris, because if you knew the virus culture process, they nuke the culture. Like they put formaldehyde, they put different forms of blood, they take out the nutrients, they put different heavy metals, they put growth mediums, they put antibiotics, antifungals, all these things. So the cell naturally is going to start breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And then they take a picture and they're like, oh, that's a virus. Another thing that I want to talk about is pleomorphism, which I'm sure you've delved into. But
Mm-hmm.
it's the fact that all germs come from one singular source, which is the microzyma or the somatid or the protid, whatever the case may be. So these germs actually will change their roles depending on the environment they are in. So the little speck of light, or these tiny little micro stem cells, they're called microzyma. They're in our blood, they're in our interstitial fluids, and they will become bacteria, fungus, yeast, mold, depending on the environment they are in. That process is called pleomorphism. Nowhere in there is there a virus, because as you said, all of these germs are symbiotically working with the body. They are adapting to the terrain. So let's say radiation, that starts to ruin your cells in your blood. The bacteria are going to change into fungus because they are bigger, more badder germs that can deal with the issue better than a bacteria can. If there's heavy metals deep in your gut, the fungus is going to change into a parasite.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of parasite, that's another thing. The definitions matter. It's not working against you, it's actually adapting to help you in a better light. So parasites have been shown to actually eat heavy metals from the gut. So if you have got a lot of heavy metals in your stomach, there's going to be parasites in there. And then they're going to revert back into their dormant form. Nowhere in there is there any sort of virus. Can they potentially be seeing microzymas in these electron microscopy pictures? For sure. But are they actually viruses causing disease? No, they're not. So that's really important for people to understand. When people tell me, oh, are viruses soaps? Are viruses solvents? Are viruses exosomes?
Mm-hmm.
No, because a virus has never actually been proven by its definition to ever exist in nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome, man. That's a good rundown there.
Yeah.
So let's go all the way back to, okay, so the definition of the word virus. So the word virus, is that an English word originally?
No, it's a Latin word.
Latin.
Yeah, Latin.
And is it actually virus, or is it like a version of virus?
Virus. That is basically the same.
How do you spell
Virus, virus. Yeah.
Oh, it's
I think
spelled the same?
Yes, same thing. I think there's an accent mark over the U, but it's basically the same.
Virus. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. And so I'm guessing that started over in Europe. They started using that term first?
Correct.
All right. Gotcha. That's interesting. That is a good way to try to figure out what's going on. Yeah, go back to the actual definition of the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So virus to them meant poison.
Yes. It meant poison. It meant cellular toxin, something that the body secreted or you caught that would cause illness. This was way before they believed something that there was physical causing disease.
Do you know the origin, like what time period that was?
This was around virus. I mean, they had these theories around the 1800s, and then it kind of changed into a more physical thing when Louis Pasteur came along.
Right on. And so at that point, microscopes had been invented, right?
Yes.
And so they were looking at cells at that point?
They were looking at these cells. I don't believe the electron micrograph, for instance, in the 1940s, at that point, they could not distinguish between healthy and unhealthy tissue, which is very important to understand the history of virology. So you had them taking pictures of these cells. So say, for instance, a guy's like, oh, this is a virus in a cell, and this is a healthy cell. The electron microscopy could not tell the difference between the two, which was a big deal, which meaning that these viruses weren't actually viruses. Right. So they were actually seeing these things back in the 40s and the 50s and seeing that they existed in healthy tissue as well. So they couldn't be viruses.
Right. Okay. Okay. And so to cap pleomorphism, that's something that I've just recently actually been exposed to. I've heard of it before, but I just kind of recently started looking into it a little bit, and I understand the concept. So they basically, the theory is that everything starts from what's called microzyma. Microzyma.
Well, Béchamp called them microzyma. He was the first one to find them. But guys like Gaston Naessens and Gunther Enderlein and Wilhelm Reich, they all called them something different. Somatid, protids, endobion, whatever the case. But they're microzyma at their core.
Right. Yeah. And so what are those things made of? Like, what are they?
They are the smallest units of life. So they disproved the cellular theory. The cellular theory was pushed by Rudolf Virchow. He thought that all life came from the cell. But Béchamp was showing that there are tinier specks of life, much smaller than a cell, that actually help the cell create life and act in the body. They repair tissue, but they also become germs. He found these when he was doing experiments with mold. So he was actually the one that proved spontaneous generation, where these germs are coming essentially from nothing. He was disproving Louis Pasteur's theory that germs are caught from the air. So he was taking, cat carcasses and plants and minerals and not exposing them to air, but they were still decaying because the germs from within were coming from the actual organism. So he was able to find these in the blood, in the cells, in the tissues, and they were much smaller than cells. And he was able to see that these little microzymas were changing their form to respond to the body, which then goes into what you said about the whole creator. I believe in the creator. I believe in an intelligent creator. And if he does love us, then by extension, it's logical to think that he would make a microbe that would respond to the stressors that we put on our body to help us heal. Right. But allopathic comes along and they're like, oh, these guys are causing the disease, as if firefighters cause fires, as if cops are the reason there's a murder in the building. Like it doesn't make any sense. So you're blaming the response, which is the microzyma. They're just changing to react to what you're doing to your own body.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So do you think microzyma are immune to sterilization, or do you think they can be like killed?
So all of the microzyma, there's never been any evidence to show that they can actually be killed. Béchamp was able to stop their action when you would like heat them up to like 250 Celsius, but they weren't really dying. So when you use antibiotics, antifungals, antivirals, for instance, what you're doing is that you are reversing the pleomorphism. So it starts off, you can think of it as kind of like a circle, microzyma, different forms of bacteria, then different forms of fungus, yeast, mold, parasites, and then back. So it's a cycle. So when you use an antibiotic, for instance, you are acidifying the tissues and stopping the body from doing what it needs to do. So the pleomorphism reverses. The problem is now it's more toxic. Now all the waste has been pushed deeper into your tissues, and now the bacteria then has to change back into a more stronger form. So these microzymas are not going to die. They're never going to die. They keep us alive and they bring us back into the earth when we die. They're constantly living. They're a part of the plants, water, us, the air. They're everywhere. They're not going to die. You can manipulate the pleomorphism by either doing something good, changing your diet, doing detox protocols, changing the way you think in life, lessening your stress, or taking an antibiotic or a chemotherapy, which just kills everything. The microzyma is forced to change, but it never dies.
All right, yeah. So what made me think of that question is that, over the last few years, I've heard of a few different anecdotes. One was from Ogenus, and one was from Christopher Gardner. He's got a podcast called Biocharisma, which is a really cool podcast. But the original one was from Ogenus, and he claimed he did an experiment where he put an animal inside of a sterilized chamber, and I think he butchered it immediately after it was killed and then put in a sterilized chamber, and then he butchered it after that. Or maybe he didn't butcher it, but whatever happened, it was sterilized in this chamber, and within 3 days it had worms in it. And so he couldn't explain like where these worms came from. And so, he just thought that perhaps they came from, he thought his theory was that every animal has the like the larva inside of them to create these worms.
And that's the
Right.
microzyma. That's what it is.
Right. Okay. And then I heard another anecdote on Christopher Gardner's podcast last year around a certain time. Him and Owen Benjamin were getting into some discussions about stuff like this. And he said he had like a compost pile at one point. And I guess those compost, I've never actually personally had like a big compost pile, but I've seen like videos and stuff of them. And I guess they get like super hot. The temperature gets super
warm,
high inside of these compost piles. And at some point he had this thing super hot to where like nothing could survive inside this thing, right? And all of a sudden, a few days later, there was like life inside of it. There was like worms and stuff.
Yeah.
And he was, these guys were getting into, these guys are very open-minded thinkers as well. And they were getting into the idea that these things like seemingly come from nowhere. They were thinking like they come from a different dimension or something. Like they're like, what is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, what they're seeing is what Béchamp was seeing. As I mentioned before, the spontaneous generation, that's what he coined it. They're essentially coming from nothing, but they're not actually not there. They're ever present. You can't get rid of them. When I breathe out a bunch of them. My blood is filled with them. Pasteur, the father of germ theory, he believed that fermentation and disease and stuff like that was caused by airborne germs. And that fermentation, you didn't need germs to do fermenting, which nowadays we know that to not be true. They also believed that the body was sterile and that the blood was sterile, but nowadays we know that's completely untrue. And you're mentioning they're seeing these worms and these microbiological life from soil that hasn't been exposed to anything, because microbes really are life. They are the definition of life. Bacteria or antibiotic, for instance, what they kill bacteria with. Antibio meaning anti-life. It's in the definition of these words. Yeah. Like bacteria make us up. So to be afraid of these germs is to be afraid of life itself.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It just makes total sense to me, and I love it, man. So back to the microzyma, what are they actually, what is inside of them? Do they have like beating hearts, or are they breathing? Like what are they doing? How are they living? Or are they living?
So based on my research, they're very similar to cells on how they act. I don't believe they actually have ever like taken it directly and like dissected it and see exactly what's happening, because they're way too small. They're way too small to do that. What they have done though is done the pleomorphism. Like for instance, Royal Raymond Rife. I'm sure people know who he was. He healed people with frequencies essentially, and he was able to take microzymas, or what he labeled as viruses, and change them into bacteria or fungus depending on the frequency that he exposed them to.
Wow.
He'd also take the microzymas and put them into different tissues, and they would change depending on the environment. So it's all symbiotic. Guys like Dr. Robert Young, Dr. Mary Arce, Dr. Bigelson, they all proved in concept pleomorphism by doing these experiments. However, have they actually taken a little microzyma and seen it, like see what's inside of it? No, they're way too small to do that. But you can prove how they act simply by changing the environment.
Okay. So they've been observed under a microscope, right? Yes.
Right. You can only see them in a dark field microscope.
Yeah.
Because or a live field microscope. You have to see the blood in a living state. So you can't see them in electron microscopy, for instance, because EM kills the cells. So you're not going to see them. You're going to see them when you see the blood that is actually living.
Got it. Okay. So, and then got it. Looking at live blood. Okay. And that ties in with, I recently just heard of, is it the Bigelson brothers?
Yes, the Bigelson brothers. I'm in their school right now. So they teach holographic blood, and a big part of their course is the pleomorphism and understanding what it's doing in the body.
Right. Yeah, I almost picked up that book the other day, but that's a little bit maybe I got to learn some stuff first before I get into that. But
so surprisingly, for someone who doesn't know a lot about it, if you go into that book, it's not hard. It's not very. They make it very simple to understand. So if you're not intimidated by it, a little bit, don't be. It's pretty good book. I would recommend you watch.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm just right now. I'm just like I'm kind of I'm book banning myself because I have about 100 books in my library that I haven't read yet.
Same thing, bro.
I
Same
just
thing.
keep buying them and throwing them up there, man.
And I see the comment, which book it's doctors are more harmful than germs, and then holographic blood. Those two are by Dr. Harvey Biggleson, who died in 2019, but he was the one that I'm learning about in the schools.
Curious, what did they claim that he died from?
I think I haven't really. I think I've heard pneumonia or something like that, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was someone else, because a lot of holistic doctors just be dropping dead left and right.
I sure do.
Yeah, so I wouldn't
That's
be
weird.
surprised.
What do you think pneumonia is, man? We were talking about that the other day. I was like, that is just like they love throwing that word pneumonia around, man.
Dude, they love it. So the pneumonia bacteria that they say causes pneumonia is naturally in your lungs and respiratory tracts at all times.
Right.
So right then and there, it can't be a pathogen. When you go into terrain and understand that all disease is really the same disease, but at a different stage of its life.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a simple cold, right? It gets colder, the humidity drops, the mucus in your lungs is going to have to be removed to be adapting to the weather. So you're going to get a cold. But say you ate a lot of trash 2 weeks before, you've been eating a lot of garbage, you're not moving, you're not getting enough sunlight, you just got a flu shot, and you're very stressed. What's going to happen? You're going to get a flu, which is a higher valence, if you will, or a tougher cold. It's all the same disease process. But then the flu gets worse because you're even more toxic. Your diet is garbage. Your EMF exposure is through the roof. Now you're going to develop pneumonia because your lymphatic system is all clogged up, your liver's clogged up, and maybe you got your tonsils removed. A lot of people I see that get pneumonia have their tonsils removed at a very early age, and that's a big issue because your tonsils are actually lymphatic nodes. So that's your primary way for your respiratory tract from its mouth to remove contaminant, the filter. So when you remove that, all that garbage is going straight into your lungs. Right. So what is the bacteria forced to do? It's forced to then eat the dead tissue and push it out. And that's what we call pneumonia.
Yeah, that makes sense. But they love, that's a big one they love throwing around, man. Yeah. It's just like.
I always hear the same things, dude. Smallpox, pneumonia, Spanish flu. Yeah.
All right. So here's one for you. All right. So if like viruses are bullshit and like it's all virology is bullshit, like what are they injecting into us when they give us a flu shot?
So what I told you before about the cell culture process, so I'll just break it down for everyone watching. And so what they'll do is they'll take a cell, usually a monkey kidney cell, and then they'll seed the monkey kidney cell with 2 or 3 different types of antimicrobials, usually amphotericin, gentamicin, penicillin. And then they'll add their sample of a virus, which is simply usually a lung fluid or blood from someone who is sick or whatnot. They never actually prove the virus is in there. They just take the fluid and put it on the cell. And then they add formaldehyde, they add glutaraldehyde, they add growth stimulants, they add cow blood, fetal bovine serum, that's what it's called. And then they take the nutrients away from the cell, and then the cell breaks down, because obviously you just nuked it to death. And I'm making it very easy because they add so many more different ingredients, but that's essentially what they do. And then the runoff of that culture, they take the fluid and use that as a vaccine.
Right. Okay. So.
And then to attenuate it or make it safer and to make you have an immune reaction, they will add adjuvants like aluminum, like mercury, like lead.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So in the pleomorphic cycle, is there a spot in there for viruses or no?
No spot for viruses because again, that goes into the definition, something that causes disease, a submicroscopic particle. But microzymas,
right.
Yeah. But when you see, so you can look it up. I'll send, when we're after this, I'll send you some videos. Yeah. What these microzymas look like, they're essentially tiny white dots. And there's a bunch of them surrounding the blood cell, surrounding the blood and interstitial fluids. So when someone, or a virologist, for instance, if he were to take a blood sample, nuke the cell, and then he sees these tiny specks, that could potentially be a microzyma that he's seeing. But again, a virus is not part of that cycle. It's just bacteria, fungus, and mold.
Right. Yeah. I gotta remember that virus means poison.
Yeah.
So they have basically changed the definition of the word.
Yes.
That's
because they couldn't cause disease with germs. So they had to think of something else. So it must have been a liquid poison, and that's what rabies started out as. Louis Pasteur would take the poison from dogs and inject it directly into their brains. So he wasn't actually seeing a particle, he was taking fluid.
Oh my God, yeah. That's brutal. Yeah, I know how they developed the poison.
Horrible.
Dude, it's super brutal.
Yeah. Horrible, dude.
Yeah, so that's why so they changed the definition of the word. That's super sneaky, dude. And that's why I think it's important to have like old dictionaries.
Very important. I agree.
So when do you think they changed the definition of the word? Because I got like a dictionary that's like over 100 years old. I wonder what it would say if I looked up virus in there.
I think around the 1950s is when the new stage of virology took hold. So I would say any definition prior to the 1930s should have virus as a Latin term. But you said 100 years, right? So I think you should be good. So you should be able to see that.
Yeah, it's like early 1900s, man. I can't wait to check that.
Yeah, check it out
right now. Well, that's interesting, man. So, okay, so there's no spot in the pleomorphic cycle for viruses because virus actually means the original version of the word. The real definition of the word is poison, and somehow it's been convoluted into this idea that it's people think it's like a little alien or something inside your body.
Yeah, and like you mentioned it, why would a loving creator, or if you don't believe in a creator, believe in nature, why would nature just suddenly create something that it's trying to kill you? And when you think about it logically, why do they need to take a cell and nuke it to see a virus? Why can't they just take your own fluid and see the virus? Because if the virus is there, it should be in the affected area. So if I have COVID, you should take my lung fluid and see a virus. But they can't do it. So they nuke a cell and then they see it and they're like, oh, it must be there. It doesn't make any sense. Virology is filled with a bunch of escape devices and circular reasoning when you actually delve into it. It's just, it's annoying, man.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
All right, so I guess the big one that everybody wants to know, and I've heard so many theories about this, man. What the hell was AIDS?
Oh, man. This is actually one of my favorite topics, dude. So to give people a background, AIDS, much like COVID, the symptoms themselves were always around. So with COVID, for instance, you had cough, sneezing, loss of taste and smell. Those are the basic ones. Very, very similar to radiation poisoning and flu and colds. So with AIDS, it was a well-known pathology that primarily affected those that were malnourished and those that took street drugs, and then those that took chemotherapy. So those three peoples were the ones that were always affected by AIDS. AIDS is essentially, they say, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. It's really just your body not being able to heal itself. So I made a post about homotoxicology. So disease can be broken down into 6 stages, one of which inflammation, dedifferentiation, deposition, impregnation. All of these different stages have to deal with different toxicity levels. So at a certain point, your body is just going to start decaying. You can't detox properly. Your liver's backed up. Your lymphatic system is backed up. You're not getting nutrients in your diet. So you just start breaking down. And that's what AIDS is. So all these people that were taking street drugs or not getting enough food or taking chemotherapy, they were developing AIDS. So then comes along Fauci and the CDC and all these powers. They target the homosexual community because in the I believe that this was out of, I want to say 1980s or whatnot, 1993, something like that. There was a small gay community. They were taking poppers. And poppers, I'm sure people will know, these are drugs that facilitate anal sex. The problem with poppers, they are extremely toxic. They are full of nitrites and stuff like that. And they found that all the gay men that took these drugs had flu-like symptoms, pneumonia symptoms that they would label as AIDS. Because when you look at the AIDS symptoms, there's like 60, 70 different symptoms.
Right.
And then when you look at the antibody for AIDS, there's over 70 conditions that get you a positive AIDS result. And it doesn't have to be HIV. So they essentially took this non-specific symptomatology that primarily affects drug users and made normal people, for the most part, test positive with a PCR, and then gave them a drug called AZT in the hospital. AZT was a drug that was shelved because it gave people AIDS.
Right.
It gave people AIDS, and it gave them Kaposi sarcoma, which is the form of cancer. So you start giving these people that are, for the most part, a lot of them were healthy because they weren't sick. You give them AZT, they start dying, and you call it AIDS. And then you say it's HIV. It's sick. But they did the same thing, dude, with COVID. You make people test with PCR, you take them to the hospital, you put them in a ventilator, you give them, what was the drug? Not AZT, it was, I did a video about it. I forget the drug, what it was called.
I can't remember.
You remember?
Whatever.
Point being, it was a drug that was shelved, and then because it gave, it actually killed 50% of the people that it initially tested for. It was a drug for Ebola, and they figured, okay, let's try to market it for anti-COVID. And it killed pretty much everybody in the hospital. And the side effects of the drug were pulmonary fibrosis and pulmonary edema. So your lungs would fill with fluid, you start choking, they put you on a ventilator, and then you die in the ventilator because your lungs pop. Thank you. It was remdesivir. Remdesivir is the name of the drug. So it's the same playbook they did with HIV. Remdesivir was AZT. The PCR was misused. The symptoms were very non-specific. And then people started dying in the hospital.
That's insane, man. Yeah, that seems about right, too. That's wild.
It was disgusting, but
yes. So a lot of people think that there's like a cabal or something out there that's like in control of all this, and they know what's going on. Do you think doctors in general? Do you think they understand terrain theory in general, or do you think a lot of them just don't get it? They're just totally indoctrinated in germ theory, or do you think there's a certain percentage of them that maybe know about it, but they're scared to speak out because they don't want to get blackballed and lose their job or whatever?
I think a lot of people are built with intuition, knowing that terrain is true. But with schooling and the medical system, it's weeded out of their brains immediately. Because nowadays, I'm actually seeing a lot more MDs that are open to natural health, that are open to herbs, that are open to acupuncture. Because I feel like just deep down in everybody, we know that nature is not instinctually out to get us. But unfortunately, ever since the Flexner report, ever since the American Medical Association was established, they weeded out all forms of holistic medicine. So now allopathic medicine is the only one we have left here in America. So they're taught the body is attacking you, immune system, germs are bad, and that's what they believe. And that's what they're taught for 10 plus years in school and then in medical school. In my experience, a lot of my followers are surprisingly medical doctors. So, and they actually ask questions because they are interested, because I think that they're starting to see how much harm they actually do. I think it's estimated something around the lines of 250,000 people die a year from medical malpractice. It's very likely much more than that. But that's the estimate, right? So if they see that and they see, wait a second, all I'm doing is giving people drugs. These people are not actually getting better. Something inside of you, at least if you're intelligent and honest with yourself, you're going to be like, yeah, I might be the problem. I want to learn something else. And that's what we're starting to see with this whole terrain thing. We're trying to get people to understand. And what I hear as a kind of like a let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? A conflict of what I'm saying is, oh, but allopathic medicine has, improved our life, has made our life expectancy go through the roof, has killed all of these diseases, and now we're safe and more healthier than ever. When in actuality, that's not true at all. Allopathic medicine was really established around the late 1800s, early 1900s. It took the Rockefellers and the Carnegie Foundation to make a report to demonize all natural health practices in order for allopathic system to come in and take the ship. They literally just strong-armed all of natural medicine. Naturopaths, chiropractors, osteopaths, herbalists, acupuncturists, you name it, they strong-armed. They were like, you're a quack. If you don't listen to what we want you to listen to, we're not going to fund you, and we're going to demonize you. So that's what happened. Even though back then, for the most part, America was pretty healthy. After the Industrial Revolution, we were pretty healthy. We were eating raw milk. Our food was organic. Homeopathy, which was actually the biggest natural medicine around, was extremely effective and very cheap. But again, you can't make money for the cabal if it's cheap homeopath. You can't do it because they saw it as a competition. So they were like, okay, let's just get rid of them. And from now on, all we have are medical doctors that think they know everything about the body, even though they know nothing about nutrition. All they do is give drugs. And now we're kind of stuck. So
yeah. So I mean, back to what you said, like most people have a natural intuition for terrain, especially if they're not like indoctrinated or educated into the germ theory yet. But even if they are, I still think they do because, you know, my experiences with eating raw meat on social media in front of just random people, random strangers, and also mostly talking with people in person about it and like eating raw meat in front of people. The reaction that I get from people is not what you'd expect. It's not like, oh my God, people aren't freaked out. They're just like, people just, they don't care, man. Deep down, most people don't care that I eat raw meat. And that to me is intriguing because I'm like, well, if it's such a crazy thing to do, if I'm just, you know, intentionally giving myself E. coli and I'm going to die, why does everybody's natural reaction just kind of like, wow, that's interesting. Why do you do that? It's very laid back reaction because instinctively,
it is. And
no, you know, that we know that bacteria doesn't cause disease, you know?
Exactly. And I do the same when I'm drinking raw milk. People do the same thing. Wait, it's raw? It's not pasteurized? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. It's perfectly fine. I feel great.
Yeah.
I haven't delved deep into the raw meat yet. I actually did want to try it. I do make my burgers and steak are pretty rare, so I'm leading towards that. I'll get there eventually. Yeah. And I know it's easier to digest and much better for you. I know. It's just it's a psychological thing. I have to jump it. Yeah.
You just if you're ever in Nebraska or passing through, man, hit me up.
Absolutely.
We'll get you some. We'll get you hooked up.
I saw somebody ask real quick before I forget. Sure. What do you say when they say, how come our lifespans have increased? And I get this actually a lot. Back in the 1800s, 1900s, when this was all coming about, people were living in wretched filth. They were working 25 plus hour shifts in factories. They were injecting arsenic and mercury into their blood and onto their skin with a bunch of makeups. They were dumping their feces into the streets. They were living in buildings that were overcrowded. They were drinking milk from cows that were being fed swill and a lot of garbage. So a lot of people were dying. But then when the hygiene reforms came about, then you started to see life expectancy increase. However, you saw the hygiene reforms come right when allopathic system came along. So now people associate the allopathic system with the reason why we live longer, when in actuality, it was just proper hygiene, not drinking poop water, eating clean food, stuff like that. That is what led us to be more.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I love the book Dissolving Illusions so much. That was like, when I read that book, dude, that book blew my mind because it's such a beautiful title. It's a perfect title. Especially when you just start with like the graphs of like the polio, disease, and then when the vaccine came in, the polio disease was already on a sharp decline, and then the vaccine came in. So, and they're claiming that the vaccine cured polio when polio was already declined. And it's just like, I think you can apply that to so many theories out there about diseases, because it's just like, it's a very strong illusion. It's a good one, but it's an illusion that we're all, that these bacteria and things are causing disease. So, all right. So looks like we got about maybe 10 minutes here. These things cut off at 1 hour for some reason. So, I wanted to ask you real quick, what are some maybe like top 5 books that you can recommend?
Oh, so the two I mentioned, the holographic blood and Doctors Are More Harmful Than Germs. The Final Pandemic by the Baileys. So Sam and Mark Bailey wrote that book. Can You Catch a Cold by Daniel Roytos. Yeah. And honestly, the one you just said, Dissolving Illusions, that's an amazing book, honestly. So those 5 are my go-tos. But even more so, if anyone wants a recommendation, What Really Makes You Ill by Don Lester and David
Yep.
Parker. The one that got me into this was Contagion Myth by Dr. Tom McCowan, which is
Yep.
everyone should read.
For sure.
It's a really good like appetizer to the whole thing. What else we got? We got Virus Mania. That's by Torsten Engelbrecht. That's really good. I have a post about books and articles if people want to check it out, but those are the ones I recommend for sure.
Okay. Yeah, check his post for that. And I've got a couple of those books on my Instagram page. It's called Primal Book Club, because I had everybody asking me all the time, what do you recommend for books? So I made an actual separate Instagram page, and it works out pretty good.
Oh, nice, good.
So, all right, cool. Well, let's see, what else do we got here? Man, we've covered a lot already, dude. We're going to have to do another one of these.
Absolutely, I'm free whenever, dude.
An hour
Absolutely.
is not enough, dude.
No.
And someone asked if I'm going to save this live. Yeah, 100% I'm going to save it. So it'll be uploaded. Let's see. Yeah, someone else said Invisible Rainbow. That's a pretty great book.
That's a really good one, for sure.
Super long, but great. Someone said DDT was polio. I tend to believe that too.
Yep. DDT, lead arsenic, Paris green.
Yeah.
Those. Oh, another one. Dang, what was that book? I just lost it. It'll come back. It'll come back.
For sure.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah, right now we're.
I got it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bichamp versus Pasteur.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So that, if anyone is interested, that goes to the foundation of the germ theory and how it began, and how Louis Pasteur essentially lied and took Bichamp's work and then flipped it into germ theory. So if people want to actually delve into the very beginning of germ and terrain, read Bichamp versus Pasteur.
For sure. Yeah, we're full believers in the terrain theory over here, man. We're all the way in. Even though I've been eating for 6 years raw meat, and I only got sick one time off of raw venison. So that, I think, was I don't know what it was. If it was just a little humbling reminder from God or whoever that people do get sick, and there's something to it, because people do eat food and they do get sick. So I don't know if it was just an overload of E. coli from how he butchered the deer or something.
So actually our theory, because we're really starting to understand how it works. So our theory regarding food poisoning.
Yeah.
Essentially everything, once you kill something, it's going to start rotting, right? And how you prepare it is extremely important. Are you freezing it properly? Are you preparing it while washing your hands? Because just because we're terrain theorists and we know germs don't cause disease, doesn't mean we're not hygienic, right? So if you're exposing your meat to garbage, whether it be urine, feces, gases of certain kinds, heavy metals, whatever, all of that is going to seed into the meat. And the bacteria are just going to respond. So bacteria, and this is what I get a lot, people ask questions about it. Bacteria do potentially sometimes secrete waste products. Many times waste products are actually beneficial. Like Staphylococcus, for instance, the waste product for staph infection actually heals your wound. The E. coli waste product has been shown to be anti-cancer. So these are not actually bad metabolites. Sometimes, if something is rotting and it's anaerobic and it's really toxic, the metabolite can be toxic. So when you eat the food, you're essentially eating the waste. And that's what a food poisoning is. You want your food poisoning to be vomiting and diarrhea, because that's the fastest way your body's going to get rid of it. So it's not the germ, as people may claim, it's the quality of the food that you just ate. And the germ is just responding.
Sure. And someone asked what the symptoms were, and it was extreme vomiting and diarrhea for about 3 to 4 hours, and then completely over, and I was fine the next day.
Gone. Which I think is probably better than a 2-week bout with flu. So
for sure. And I think there's something to people. You can cook it out, because I know the guy that butchered the deer, he cooks all his meat, and he never mentioned getting sick from it. So, but yeah, real quick here, we got like 3-4 minutes. Yeah, man, I just want to say, we're raising a baby now. Me and my wife, we all eat raw meats. We eat raw chicken. I just had some fermented chicken the other day. I stick it in a jar and air it out, and it's basically rotting chicken. And I ate it and didn't get sick. And we feed my son raw chicken. He's been eating raw chicken and raw beef and raw eggs since he was 4
He's going to grow up to be an absolute unit.
I hope so, man. I hope So yeah, he's never seen a doctor. He's never seen a medicine. But you know, people freak out about bacteria and raw meat and germ theory and all that stuff. And I'm like, you know, my baby is eating it. So I think anybody can do it. But all right, man, I think we should wrap this up before we get booted, man. So I really appreciate you coming in. This is like a really great conversation, and we'll have to do it again.
Absolutely, man. Let me know whenever. I'm so down to keep talking.
All right, man. You have a good rest of your day, bud.
See you.
All right, see ya.